Selkie by Arike Oke. I'd just taken the lid from the saucepan to stir the fish stewing in there when MacGregor began knocking at my kitchen door. The door had been rattling on and off with a high wind all evening, but this knocking was persistent and panicked, as if he were using both fists to pound down the poor rain-sodden wood. I lifted the plank from the door. I would have just opened it a crack, but the weather pushed it all the way open. MacGregor fair fell in a wave of heavy rain and gust. I shoved the door shut and replanked it. "Well, now you're in, will you take a seat?" I offered MacGregor a seat at my table and put some drink in a cup for him. He took the drink down in one swallow. Coughing from its kick, he wiped his hair from across his forehead and thanked me. I peered at him. In this light, everything unusual in my kitchen seemed murky. I could see the things that belonged to me well enough. The chopping knife gleaming in the firelight, and the hair hung up on the wall. Everything in their own natural places. Only MacGregor stood out in his darkness, his body heaving a silhouette of itself across the table, bringing the cold of outdoors unwelcome through the room. He had an oilskin satchel strapped across him, and this he jealously kept with one hand, thus obliging me to keep my eye on it as well. "What's there then?" I asked, as reasonable as you might ask a man in these circumstances. MacGregor rolled his eyes in their sockets. They were red, shot through with blood. I used to admire those eyes, and in all honesty, I used to admire the rest of him as well. But that was years ago, before he brought back his wife from the other side of the Sound, and before they had those 3 beautiful children. Children with eyes as big in their faces as owls do have, and always looking so calm within themselves. That's how you really knew his wife couldn't be one of us. No, not even from the other side of the town by the storm. It's bad to say, but those children were far too beautiful to have come from our stock. That's just the truth. MacGregor sat there drinking what I gave him and handling his oilskin satchel. After 4 drinks, he still hadn't said anything. From time to time, he shook his head, as though stunned from a sudden blow. And so, I went back to the stove to stir the fish again. When I lifted the lid and the bright smell of the fish liquor rose up from inside, MacGregor groaned. "It's no good. It's no good no more," he said. "What's that now?" I said back to him. "It's too late. It's all too late. She's going to come for me." "Who's this?" MacGregor looked at me, shining with his wild tears in his eyes. "My wife, of course. She's coming. I can hear her already tearing down sheds, ripping sails through moored ships, cutting through any poor soul that stands in her path. She won't stop this time. I've kept her too long and she knows it all now." This raving comes over a man if one of them spends too long out in the water alone, caught in bad weather, surviving, but barely. They come back with stories of sea spirits that have appeared to them out on the water. They tell of seeing beautiful faces that appear in the waves, or of seeing naked flesh of lassies slipping under the waves, like between blankets. My mum said, "They're just seals that the fishermen are seeing, shining and slippery with the water, but no more than seals." Some of those men get spooked in weather like this. Them you have to keep an eye on when the storm rolls into the harbour. Them you have to keep locked up, keeping away where they can't hear the rattle of the wind on the loose bits of the houses. MacGregor should have known better, though. He was born here. No, not those stories. I tell him, slapping him hard on the back, rubbing his shoulders as I would a shank of meat I want to tender up. You know better than that, Will MacGregor. It's a storm outside, a bad one, granted, but no more than a wild storm that's blown in, and it will blow itself out again. The storm, as if hearkening, began to rattle my boarded-up windows and door yet harder. It sounds to me as if it wants to get in, doesn't it? But it's just a winter storm. Happens every year about this time. Aye, and every year since my wife's come, said MacGregor, holding his beard in a hand made skeletal, tight with his tense grip. Tonight she's searched every place she can. Tonight she'll find it again. I thought I'd better not send him back home until he's given up his behaviour. I spooned some of the stew into a bowl for him and gave him some bread with it. Can't you hear her singing my name? Said MacGregor. He began to shiver. And in that moment, I did think that I could hear something like MacGregor, as the wind circled round the house. But of course, it was just the influence of a dark night and bad company. Now, why would you be frightened of your wife? I said. If she's out there looking for you, more likely she's worried for your safety. No, not her, said MacGregor. I kept her coat, don't you see? Her sealskin coat. She can't go home without it. I've hid it this many years, out of love. I want her with me. And for a while, that's what she wanted too. She thought she'd lost it, you see, but now she knows it was me. I always had it. Every year she searched for it. She won't forgive me, I know it. You're raving, I said. No one would ever be so angry over a missing coat. I've got 2 sealskins myself. MacGregor reared up at this. He rose from his chair. No, you haven't, he said. He came round the table at me, and I held the metal ladle between us. It pressed against my chest, and his beard rubbed against my cheek. He whispered in my ear, she's a Selkie. I pushed him off. He was more cracked than I thought. I didn't know that you listened to old wives' tales, I said, and I laughed at him. There isn't such a thing as a seal that can turn into a woman. He flinched at my laughter. I regret it now, of course, laughing at him. I wasn't to know, was I? That I wouldn't see him again. The storm beat harder on the walls of my house. My granddad built this house himself, and it could withstand harder storms than this. I told that to MacGregor, but he shook until eventually he could stand it no more, and he broke from the chair to get out of the door. I must leave, she knows I'm here, he said, as I tried to wrestle the door plank from him. He was much stronger than I. His strength is the kind of strength that you find out at the water, while mine is strictly from working on land. He got to the door and he ran out into the wetness that shot and spat and slapped at me. There was no use running after him. I shut the door up again and said a blessing for him, to find another shelter and to find his wits. The storm blew itself out that same night, and by the morning, the sun made jewels on pools of water left behind. There wasn't much damage to my house, but I knew that. Happened that MacGregor wasn't so fortunate. Wasn't seen in our village again. Neither was his wife. Perhaps she'd gone out in the storm to look for him. Now, that they disappeared would not have been quite so remarkable. As I said, she wasn't from our parts. It's possible they could have moved on without telling folk, if they were old enough to do that. but to leave their 3 beautiful children behind. That was strange indeed. I heard that the bairns refused to speak a word, not even a sound, after that night. The constable said he regretted having to do it, but he'd have to take them up to the orphanage in town. He put them in his car to drive them there himself. He told me, as he drove past the harbour wall, the bairns began to shriek and keen. He said when he pulled to the roadside to try and calm them down, no sooner had he opened the passenger door when they each slipped out like little eels. They jumped over the harbour wall into the water and vanished from sight. Well, there was a search party, but nothing found. No trace. Then an inquiry into the constable. He didn't come out so well. I mean, not that he wasn't believed in as a person. I mean, we'd known him all our life. You couldn't find a more honest man. Still, 3 missing children. Well, it ruined him from his police duties. He couldn't find work on a boat either. No one wants bad luck aboard. I gave him help with some odd jobs from time to time. I feel for him. It's no way to provide for a family. That was 5 years ago that MacGregor disappeared. We've not had a storm blow in since.